Whoa, what's up? Hey, Graham. Whoa! Timber! Everything's falling over. All right. I think we're good now. I'm also streaming on YouTube, so if I look over at that, that is why. So hello, YouTube friends, if you're watching me there. It's a little bit delayed though, so I'm gonna try to not get distracted by what is happening on YouTube and see, like on the YouTube stream, I just now tipped my phone over. So we're gonna try this dual live stream. Really, I'm doing that so that I can archive this, and people who aren't available for this particular hour of the day are able to go back and watch it later. So, YouTube, Twitter. I will try to keep it all together. So this is Tuesday with Tara slash Terrascope, whatever you want to call it. It still sounds weird every time I say that, but we're going to roll with it. And we have an hour until the Cardinals game starts, an hour and 15 minutes until the Blues game starts. So ask your questions, ask away. It can be about baseball, it can be about hockey, although I don't have a whole lot to add to that conversation. It can be about anything else that you want to just throw out there into the live stream universe. So go for it. Shoot me your questions. I'm recording a new podcast with Alex tonight, post-game-ish. Last week we started recording before the game ended, and it was a major distraction, so I'm not sure if we'll do that again or not, but new chirps will be up tomorrow, and so we'll know about last night, but that's the huge. You all know that, especially y'all on YouTube, because that's how you found this, right? It's because you're already subscribed. Rams talk. We can talk about the fact that the Rams aren't in St. Louis anymore, and that's about the extent of it. Quite honestly, I don't watch a whole lot of football, even less NFL football than, say, college, perhaps. So I don't have a ton to add to the NFL conversation. I used to see. I never grew up where I grew up. We didn't have an NHL or an NFL team. Obviously, I did not grow up in St. Louis. For those of you who are unaware, I grew up in the Mountain West part of the U.S., and we didn't have an NHL team. We didn't have a Major League Baseball team. We didn't have a football team. There's a soccer team there now that wasn't always there, and we have the Utah Jazz. So I didn't grow up a huge football or hockey fan. My dad's from St. Louis, so the baseball thing is kind of the one thing that I latched onto. So I feel for football fans in St. Louis, but I don't have a huge personal attachment to what was, or, hope for what it might be again. So that's me in football. I just don't really care that much since I don't have a significant attachment to a team. I watched a lot more NFL games when I was way more into the college football scene, because then I would follow college players into their NFL careers, and I would sort of become a de facto fan of the teams that they played for. So that's when I watched the most NFL, but now I just don't care. I think I watched one game this last season and half of the Super Bowl, and I was fine. It didn't make my life any less significant for not watching football. But anyway, that's that. Let's talk about something that I do have something to say about, unless you want to hear me ramble on about how I don't have anything to say about football. The weekend in Chicago was brutal. The rebound last night was nice to see. I think it's even more important than a team when they're struggling is watching how they rebound from that. What's up, Cardinals Gifts? Stu, my man, how goes it? You were at the game last night, yeah? So how they rebound from a rough stretch is as telling to me as anything. So to see them come right back, put up 6 runs, to see Miles Michaelis go out there and pitch a shutout, to see what Jordan Hicks does to everyone, including Bryce Harper, is phenomenal. You're welcome, Graham. I hope that you liked that answer. I mean, I don't know quite what you were looking for, but I did ask about Cole Hamels, and I thought Corey gave a pretty fair answer as far as what he brings to that Cubs rotation. So Christian, I know, I'm sure. So I'm, for those of you who haven't been paying attention to me and my weird hockey jumping on the bandwagon, um, I've never really been into hockey, but I always feel like I should be. So I kind of decided to just keep up with the Blues a little bit this year. And then, of course, now that we're talking about postseason hockey, I can't not be invested because I'm a sports fan, and that's what we do, is we dive in and go all in when it matters. So I'm not as nervous, I'm sure, as people who have been diehard Blues fans for their whole lives, but I feel the nerves from all of you. Hey, Victoria, how are you? Busy, I take it, by the just dropping in. But hello, thanks for stopping by. Um, I do have a series preview coming up before the Pirates series, so you can send me questions for that. I'm talking to Alex Stump, who did a preview with me last year, and I loved it because he's like hardcore numbers guy, and I love that stuff, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't come super naturally to me to just sort of really dissect all the numbers of what's going on. So I love talking to someone like Alex, because he brings out a lot of really, really interesting things based on some numbers and their context that I wouldn't necessarily put together myself. So that's the Pirate series preview that's coming up, talking to him tomorrow. So send me questions about the Pirates for him. Victoria, I am doing well. Thank you so much. Thank you on YouTube, getting some comments as well. I appreciate you continuing to come back and watch the content on this channel. And as always, let me know if there's other stuff you want to see, because I'm very much down for trying something new. So, Goldschmidt, Graham. Graham, you always end up asking about the stuff that we're going to talk about in the podcast, because that is going to be one of the primary focuses of the podcast that will come out tomorrow, which you don't listen to anyway, so it doesn't matter. Paul Goldschmidt is concerning to me right now, not because I don't think he'll figure it out, but because it's costing the Cardinals in big spots right now. So it's a problem because Paul Goldschmidt is supposed to be the guy that solved that problem. Will the XFL succeed? That is a very fair question, considering what was it, the American, or what was the other one? AAF, something like that, football, whatever it was. That one lasted for like a day and a half. So hopefully the XFL succeeds, because I think a lot of people in St. Louis are excited about having it there, even if it's not the NFL. But I'm certainly not in any position to like have this grand revelation of how it will or won't succeed. Yeah, Graham. So Paul Goldschmidt is a problem for me right now. And again, I want to reiterate, it's not because I'm panicking or because I am looking at a small sample size and sort of projecting that out over the course of the whole season, but because right now he's not who the Cardinals brought him in to be. And it's strange to try to figure out why. I didn't do a deep dive into what the problems were with Paul Goldschmidt in the first half of the season last year. But just as a little teaser for what I'm going to bring out on the podcast, he's struggling against fastballs. And that's not good. Like, the problem with Matt Carpenter right now, and really over his career, is that he has a hard time hitting sliders. That makes more sense to me than someone who is suddenly, for the first time really in their career, struggling against fastballs. So I don't know quite what the reason for that is. I don't quite know what the the people who can dive deeper into those analytics are seeing. Heard an interview with the Diamondbacks manager last week, and he was asked what about their lineup with Goldie? I think there's more to that question. I'm going to hold that thought and see what happens. Oh, he was asked about it with or without him. He said they were better positioned to deliver as a team without him. I'm very confused about what that means. The NFL needs competition. That's probably fair. Better positioned as a lineup, like on a night-by-night basis, they were better positioned to deliver without him? Because that makes no sense at all. Did he mean like better positioned going forward as an organization without him, because they weren't going to have money wrapped up in an aging first baseman, or like I feel like there's some context missing for me to really be able to know what that is about. Paul Goldschmidt has been one of the best hitters in the game. So to say that you're a better lineup without him doesn't really make a lot of sense. The team was waiting on him to deliver in key spots. Well, that's not a Paul Goldschmidt problem. That's a the live stream just went down. That's not a Paul Goldschmidt problem. That is a rest of the lineup problem. And if the rest of the lineup is just sitting around waiting for Paul Goldschmidt to deliver, then that's a coaching problem. Right? That seems like that's not on Goldschmidt at all. That's on the rest of the organization or the rest of the team, and how they're prepared to contribute. That seems like a really strange thing to say to me. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Well, sorry, YouTube. We tried. We'll see if it figures it out. Yeah, I guess I mean, that's just a really weird comment to me to say that this team is better positioned without him. Because again, like if that's the case, then that's on everyone else for not being ready and not being in a mindset to contribute. And the idea of just waiting on Goldschmidt to come through is very silly to me. But the fact is, the Cardinals need him to come through right now. See, the flip side of that is that the Cardinals are not doing that. They're not sitting around saying, well, I guess I can do whatever I want because Paul Goldschmidt isn't contributing. Like, we're just going to sit back and twiddle our thumbs until he figures it out. The rest of the lineup is contributing, and that's how they've been able to be so good, despite the fact that he's been off to such a rough start. So, that's why it's a little strange to me. But, that doesn't take away from the fact that he's there to contribute in big spots, and he has done that for most of his career, at least over the course of an entire season. So it's just a matter of getting him to where he needs to be. No, you're fine, Jason. I just was having trouble piecing together the context of that. Hello, Dark Vanilla 51. Graham, why isn't Wieters catching Dakota Hudson? I don't know. I will be curious to see what difference there is with Yadi catching him versus Wieters catching him, because he was so much better the last time out. But I think it's also kind of silly to try to take away from what Yadi or Molina does. So I don't know. But I will be curious to see what happens there. Players will be paid in Bitcoin someday. All right, what's Drew Robinson been up to? Nothing significant for the major league team. Opinions on what Schultz should do with the outfield. Yadi and his bat are on fire right now. Yeah, I want to talk about Yadi, so let me come back to that real quick. What should Schultz do with the outfield? It's a really interesting situation because you've got four guys who absolutely need to be in the game, right? Bader needs to be in there because of his defense. Fowler has been playing really well. And yeah, Graham, I know Kyle's theory about Wieters catching Hudson. I don't know all the details. I think I've missed some of the conversation about it, but I do know that that's where it comes from. Jose Martinez you can't take him out of the lineup right now. So how you mix those guys in is a bit of a challenge, but I think that the important thing is that it stays a mix, not a stable, these are the three guys, here's a guy who's going to get a couple of at-bats now and then. Because then, none of them are going to stay as sharp as they need to be. And quite honestly, I think Mike Schultz has done a really nice job about that so far. Now, he's had a little bit of an assist from injuries or illness that have made those decisions a little easier, but I think he's done a pretty nice job of maintaining enough of a consistent mix that no one is kind of left out of the picture for too long. And as such, he's still been able to get contributions from them. I think we're back up on YouTube, so I don't know exactly what happened there, but sorry about that. Can you ask about a certain team in the NL Central? Sure, you can ask about any team in the NL Central. Wieters has been an excellent backup catcher. It's because he's not really a backup, right? I mean, he's been a starter everywhere else in his career. So he's positioned to play like a starter. And what's been impressive is how he's done that in really, really limited appearances. He's been able to maintain the consistency and to play really well, even when he doesn't have a whole lot of opportunities to do so. Yadier Molina. Victoria, you mentioned Yadier Molina. What's so impressive to me about Yadi is that, he's not tearing the cover off the ball. He's not, his WRC plus is still below 100, which is average. But he has one of the best contact rates in the league. He has the highest, the lowest strikeout percentage in the league. And basically, he doesn't swing and miss. So he's going to make contact. The thing that Yadi struggles with sometimes is hitting it right at a guy or hitting it on the ground. But he doesn't swing at pitches outside the strike zone. He doesn't swing and miss. So it's impressive to me that someone who maybe doesn't always put the hits together enough to have that really sky-high average, he's actually just such a tough out because he's going to make contact and he's going to, make you throw pitches in the strike zone. So, not that I really needed another reason to be impressed with Yadier Molina, but he's been doing other things really well. Matt, your message went away. I was going to mention it and then it went away. He does have patience, and more than patience, I think for me, it's understanding the strike zone, which maybe shouldn't be surprising because he's a catcher, but a lot of times it's different understanding the strike zone when you're catching than it is when you're hitting, and not all catchers can translate that very well. But so it's even more than patience. It's recognizing pitches and understanding the strike zone around him. Yadi's been waiting for the pitch he wants like such a boss. Yeah, Matt, you're right. And it's that's what's so interesting to me about him is that we often complain when he's slumping a little bit at the plate, but the fact that he still has such a good understanding of the strike zone and he knows how to make contact and he'll foul off lots of pitches. We saw him do that last night. He'll work the count. Sometimes he swings at the first pitch in a situation where you're like, of course he's going to swing at the first pitch and pop it up, but he's going to make contact. That's one thing that you know about Yadier Molina. More often than not, he's going to make contact and probably put the ball in play. So that's an impressive quality in him. Okay, there was a lot of stuff there. Do you think Tyler O'Neill will still be in the organization after the trade deadline? Maybe. What's your take on the Brewers? I'm a Brewers fan and their pitching stinks right now. Yeah, their pitching's a bit of a problem. I actually picked the Brewers to win the division. I think that they have a really, really solid lineup if they're all hitting well. The problem is they're not all hitting well, and their pitching hasn't lived up to expectations. So they kind of turned the keys over to all these young pitchers, right, as far as the starters were concerned. And those young guys haven't come through. They haven't lived up to those expectations. So now they're kind of scrambling as far as starters are concerned, and their bullpen isn't what it was last year. So that was sort of the concern, right, is can the Brewers replicate what they did with their bullpen last year so that their starting pitching can still be a bit of an experiment? Right now, the answer to that is no. They don't have the strength of the starting pitching to allow their bullpen those moments of weakness, and they don't have the depth in their lineup that they should have based on the kind of career numbers of most of those guys in that lineup. If Christian Yelich isn't tearing the cover off the ball, he needs those other guys in the lineup that really you should go at least 6 deep in that lineup and feel like, boy, there's not an easy out in this bunch. And right now, that's not the case. So I still think the Brewers have a ton of potential. I think that they could be very, very dangerous once they start hitting like they're capable of. But the pitching is definitely going to be an issue, especially if their bullpen can't recover some of those innings that the starters aren't pitching right now. And if the thing that made that mix work for them last year is that their pitching was good enough to get to the bullpen. Right now, their starting pitching isn't good enough to get to the bullpen. So that's my take on the Brewers. Wieters has the highest exit velocity on the team, if you like those numbers. Yeah, he hits the ball hard. I won't even be mad if the Cardinals get shut out tonight because it's Aaron Nola. Um, yes, I think there's a chance Tyler O'Neill gets traded. I just am not sure. I'm not sure what the market is going to look like for someone who hasn't really had a chance to establish himself at the major league level, because he's so far ahead of AAA pitching that it's just not even like there's no value in him continuing to destroy pitches at AAA, but he's not been good enough in limited appearances at the big league level that you can really sell him as a guy who's going to just mash in the major leagues. So I'm not quite sure what the market is going to be for that. I love that we have this problem with Yachty. 10 years ago, no one cared that he didn't hit. Yeah, you're right. It's really impressive to see him continue to adapt and continue to evolve and continue to grow his game. Can I give you a Nolan Gorman interview when I'm in Peoria? That is the plan. I have not arranged it as of yet, but yes, that is my plan, is to try to talk to Nolan. I might try to pick up a couple of other interviews while I'm there, so let me know if there's someone else you want to hear from. Matt on YouTube says, I think they'll keep O'Neill as Ozuna insurance. That's certainly a possibility, although I think what they're seeing from Jose Martinez and Dexter Fowler makes the outfield interesting enough, but you might be very accurate in that if Ozuna leaves after this season, they may have a spot for Tyler O'Neill. The Brew Crew will be in on Keuchel after June 1st. Maybe. I'm surprised they haven't been in on him already, quite honestly, because the pitching picture for them is pretty bleak right now. So I'm a little surprised they haven't been in on Dallas Keuchel yet. Although I'm surprised that nobody's in on Dallas Keuchel right now, let's be honest. Her outfield situation is a tale as old as time. Yeah, it's not a bad thing to have a lot of potential outfielders. The Cubs were in first place for one day. Yeah, it was fun while it lasted for them, but listen, we just got into May, so that's what we'll see. Yeah, and you know what? Keuchel is perfectly within his rights to say, look, here's what I'm worth, and that's what I will be willing to take. The issue then is that he's up against the reality that if someone doesn't offer him that money, then he's not going to play baseball. Which would be a shame, because I think he is certainly good enough to have a job in Major League Baseball. It's just a matter of, a team feeling the same way. I feel like I missed a question. What did I miss? The Brewers didn't get Hamels or Archer last year, bought cheap on Gio. Stearns works with the payroll. Yeah, and he usually does something that you're kind of like, huh? And then it works out. So I won't be surprised if Gio ends up being a great deal for them. But yeah, I mean, that has to be why they haven't gone after Keuchel, right? Is that Stearns is a guy who's not going to just throw a ton of money at somebody. He's going to be creative and get a little bit crafty in how he goes about bringing somebody in. He should have just signed with us before spring training. Dallas Keuchel, I'm assuming, is who we're talking about. Who is someone I want to see get an extension? I want to go with Jack Flaherty and probably Jordan Hicks. Those are two that I think seem pretty obvious. They're the kind of players that I think the Cardinals tend to extend early on in their careers. I'm not surprised they didn't do it before this season started, simply because, especially with Jordan Hicks, I mean, last year was so great, but bullpen arms are so volatile that you might get one really great season where you're like, oh, there's a ton of potential here, and then the next year he just falls off the face of the earth. So I'm not surprised they didn't do that with Jordan Hicks. I wouldn't have been super shocked by a Jack Flaherty extension, but also, to give him that second year at the big league level where he's pitching every 5 days, I'm not super surprised by that either. So those are the two that I think I would expect to be next in line as far as the extensions are concerned. What about you? Who do you guys want to see pick up an extension? I'm just thinking across the infield, pretty set there. Outfield, I guess Harrison Bader would be the other one. But I think they want to see how he adjusts this season too, right? Because I mean, he was not hitting much at all before the injury. And while I don't think anyone's expecting him to be a middle of the order type bat, you want to see some consistency from him on the offensive front if you're going to sign him to make him part of this, long-term future for the organization, which they kind of set up, right? With all of their offseason promotions, it was all about Harrison Bader. So I'm a little surprised there wasn't any more to go along with that. But Graham, you want him to sign Ozuna. Interesting. What if Reyes was involved in a trade to the Blue Jays for Stroman? I mean, that would probably give you more immediate value, right? Stroman would give you an instant boost. But I'm not sure that that's what you're going to get from Reyes at this point. No one knows what he is. No one knows what he has to offer. So, joke or not, that kind of thing is going to come up until Reyes comes up and establishes himself. So, the issue with Reyes is that what his real value is as a major leaguer is still to be determined. So that's kind of where we're at with him. Flaherty before Ozuna. Flaherty believes in himself, and that's worth money. Yeah, I love what I see from Jack Flaherty. I think even what we've seen from him in his rougher starts this season has been telling, because you see him frustrated, but you also feel like he has a good understanding of what happened or what didn't happen. And that's important in a guy who can fix that down the road. So I like the mentality that Jack has. I obviously like his skill set. I like his intensity. I think he kind of has that, to some degree, a very young Chris Carpenter kind of, intensity to him when he pitches that it's so important to have that in a rotation, to have a mix of guys like Miles Mikolas, who's just kind of super chill and isolated and does his own thing and then moves on with his life. But then to also have someone like Jack who can be that really incredibly intense competitor. Not that Mikolas isn't a competitor, it's just a difference in approach and a difference in attitude. I think having a nice mix of all of that in the rotation is something that most teams like to have. So yeah, Jack would be the first choice for me, I think, and then move on from there. Don't mind my ironing board in the corner. Which you can't see on the YouTube shot because I framed that one much nicer. Sorry, Twitter friends. Speaking of Twitter, let's see what's going on there. What else should we talk about? There's a nice collection of people talking about the mug cakes that I was talking about earlier. Not mug cakes. Not getting involved in any bidding wars for Rendon or JD Martinez. True. I just am not convinced that the Cardinals are going to be able to put up the money that Ozuna is going to want. Scott Boras connection and all. Sorry, there were YouTube things flashing up that were confusing me. What 3 outfielders would I roll with? I wouldn't roll with 3. I would roll with a consistent mix of the 4 outfielders that we have been seeing, because I think all 4 of them bring something a little bit different to the table, and I think that all 4 of them need consistent playing time in order to maintain that sort of consistent production. So I think that Mike Schultz has done a really nice job. Like I said earlier, he kind of got an assist by having Harrison Bader and Tyler O'Neill be hurt and then Dexter Fowler be sick. But I think he's done a really nice job of kind of manipulating that mixture of players in a way that is the most productive. I'm curious to see how that plays out over a longer stretch in the season. But, it's not just riding the hot hand. Someone kind of freaked out at me about that the other day on Twitter, because they were, not a fan of this just play the hot hand philosophy. And I get that. But I don't think Mike Schultz is just going to kind of like, well, whoever had 4 hits yesterday, that's who's going to hit today. But I do think that if someone has, 3 or 4 multi-hit games in a row, he's not necessarily going to take them out of the lineup for somebody who hasn't had a hit in 9 days. I think there's a balance there, and the biggest part of that is communication. The biggest part of that is Mike Schilt being able to say to those guys, look, this is how we're going to win as a team. Don't worry, you're going to get your at-bats, you're going to get your chances to contribute, you're going to get your days to start. But right now, the best way for us to win as a unit is to go with these 3 guys, but you're going to get your chance to produce at some point in this game as well. And I think that's a thing he's done really well so far. So I wouldn't roll with 3 and then just sort of lock it down and move on from the 4th guy unless someone gets hurt. I wouldn't do that. I would continue to try to maintain this mix of the 4 that they've got going right now. Because like I said, they all bring something different to the table. And that is a great problem to have. You're welcome. Am I concerned about how the Cardinals are performing against NL Central teams? Well, they looked bad against the Brewers to start with. And then they evened things up. Actually, the season series, I believe, is evened up at 5 apiece. So, yes and no, because the Cardinals obviously have to be able to beat those teams in the division. But we knew from the very beginning that this division was going to be one of the toughest in baseball, and that particularly those 3 teams, the Cubs, the Cardinals, and the Brewers, were going to be just going at each other from day one, and that it wasn't ever going to be easy. There's not ever going to be an easy win between the Cubs, the Cardinals, and the Brewers. So, yes, concerned, I guess, in that the Cardinals need to be able to beat those teams, but no, because I'm not surprised that it was a problem with the Brewers to start with or with the Cubs to start with. Obviously, getting swept at Wrigley leaves like a pit in your stomach as a fan, but I wasn't shocked in that I expected these 3 teams to really keep dragging each other down throughout the course of the season because they're so evenly matched. So I'm not panicking about the Cardinals struggling against the Brewers and the Cubs because I sort of expected it to be a really close fight between those 3 teams. Thoughts on Dominic Leone? I think that when Carlos Martinez is cleared from his rehab appearances, Dominic Leone is likely on the bubble as far as one of the guys that ends up back at Memphis. And I'm sure that they will spin it as, especially if he has one more rough outing, just trying to clean up the mechanics, right? And do it in a lower pressure situation. So if Dominic Leone, being one of the guys who has an option left, goes back to Memphis, can pitch in some innings that aren't going to hurt the major league team and really figure out what he's doing differently now than he was doing at the very beginning of the season when he was so successful, I feel like that's a pretty easy sell to the fan base as well as to maybe even Dominic Leone himself, who I'm sure doesn't want to go to AAA, but knowing that it's for a limited time and maybe he can get it figured out so then he can contribute in those big innings, that's probably for the best. I haven't watched closely enough, nor am I the mechanics expert to be able to tell you what it is exactly that he's doing, but he's not fooling anyone. So whatever it is, he doesn't seem to think that it's a physical issue, although they never do, right? But if it's just a thing about his mechanics, then, maybe going down when Martinez comes up is not the worst thing ever. Matt asked about thoughts on Gregerson. My thoughts on Luke Gregerson are that I don't really understand what value he provides at this point. So he looked good in his rehab starts, or appearances, not starts. My issue with Gregerson, I talked about this with Daniel Shoptaw on our podcast on Sunday nights. My issue with Gregerson is that it is not necessarily that he can't be effective. My issue is, in what way is Gregerson better than one of the other options that the Cardinals have right now? So is Luke Gregerson better than having Ryan Helsley in the bullpen? Is Luke Gregerson better than, at this point, they didn't send Giovanni Gallegos down because he's been so good. Is Luke Gregerson better than a Carlos Martinez out of the bullpen? So it's not so much for me, can Luke Gregerson contribute? It's, is he better than their other options? And right now, I don't feel like he is. I mean, if he can only top out at 88 miles an hour and he doesn't have enough movement to fool anybody, then what is his value? And Matt, maybe they're trying to get trade value out of him, but I don't know how quickly you can regenerate trade value from a guy who didn't pitch for basically an entire season and has only had success in minor league rehab appearances. So maybe, but I don't know that that's a realistic expectation for a guy to come in, throw a couple of major league innings, get a few outs, and suddenly be a trade chip. I just don't know that there's a lot of value left there in what they've seen from him or in how he fits better than someone else in the organization. I said earlier in the year, the biggest problem for me would be if they decided to play contracts over skill set. Contracts over talent gets you in trouble a lot. And we had this conversation about Dexter Fowler. We had the conversation at some points this season about Marcell Ozuna before he fell off the left field wall and was given magical powers. The problem you get into there is trying to justify giving him one more chance, giving him one more outing, saying he's just one pitch away or whatever it is because of what the expectation is based on the contract as opposed to what the reality is of the talent that he can bring to the table. So for me, there's not a ton of value there to generate. And maybe part of that is because I didn't love the Gregerson deal when he became a Cardinal. Part of that is because they tried to sell the fact that he was going to be the closer, and it was like, how dumb do you think we all are? Because that's never going to happen. So maybe there's still a little bit of residual lack of interest on my part because of that. Why doesn't Paul DeJong get love nationally? You sounded like Liz talking about Neshek. That's fair. Maybe a similar situation there. Paul DeJong not getting love nationally. Honestly, I think it's a couple of things. He plays on a team with Yadier Molina and Paul Goldschmidt, so he's not the name that people think of. He's also a super quiet guy that doesn't have much of a track record nationally as far as his impact on games, in nationally exposed experiences. Although I will say he's been on pretty much all of the MLB Network talk shows in the last week or so. He was on before the Cubs-Cardinals series. He was on after the win last night. He's been a guy that more and more people are focusing on because you have to. I mean, you look at any offensive leaderboard in the National League, Paul DeJong's pretty much on it. So why doesn't he get more attention nationally? I think it's just because he hasn't been around long enough to establish himself as one of the best hitters in the league. I think this year, at this point, he's establishing himself as one of the best hitters in the league, so more and more people are starting to at least take notice and recognize the name, even if they're not entirely sold on him as, a cornerstone piece of this Cardinals team that includes the likes of Matt Carpenter, Paul Goldschmidt, and Yadier Molina. So I don't think it's, it's just sort of what it is. And St. Louis isn't a market where a lot of average sort of general baseball fans are paying attention. So, they're looking at Cody Bellinger because he plays in LA. They're looking at Aaron Judge because he plays in New York. They're not necessarily looking at Paul DeJong, who bats in the middle of the order between Paul Goldschmidt and Marcell Ozuna in St. Louis. So there are a lot of factors that go into that, but I think the biggest one is just that he hasn't been around long enough to establish this as a consistent track record, which is, why this year is pretty significant for him. What else? Game starts in like 20 minutes, so finally got our Tulo in Pauly D. That's a really interesting comparison, Matt. I was never a big Tulo bandwagoner in the idea of bringing him to St. Louis, mostly because every time that came up, it was at the point in Tulo's career where he was injured all the time. And I wasn't a huge fan of that, spending as much money as it was going to take to get him to have him be injured all the time. I know you were a big Tulo guy, Graham. I think Fowler should bat first with his recent on-base success, move Carpenter Goldschmidt down. That is my ideal scenario, and I've said it time and time again. I think this lineup is better with Matt Carpenter not batting at leadoff. And so many people respond to that with, but he can't hit outside of the leadoff spot. I do not believe that. The opportunities where we've seen that have been such a small sample size, and there have been so many other extenuating circumstances that I certainly don't believe that that would be the case over the course of a season. We've seen, even in the last 2 years, the slow starts that Matt Carpenter's gotten off to, it takes him a while to adjust. It's not just like all of a sudden instantly he makes a change and it's flawless. It takes him a while to adjust. And as Graham said, he's not hitting in the leadoff spot anyway. So why not, right? But I like, in my perfect world, I like Dexter Fowler, the on-base version of Dexter Fowler, batting leadoff, Matt Carpenter second, Paul Goldschmidt third. I think that lengthens your lineup a little bit more. I think that it gives you more of an opportunity to score runs early because of the likes of Dexter Fowler getting on base. It also gives you the opportunity to, maybe if you still have Colton Wong batting at the bottom of the order, although I think some people would make a case for him moving up at some point as well, but that's beside the point. Often you're going to end up with Colton Wong and Dexter Fowler on base ahead of Matt Carpenter, Paul Goldschmidt, Paul DeJong, Marcell Ozuna. That's not a bad thing. Yadier Molina after that. So I think that it sets up your lineup a little bit better, but I also think there's some truth to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And maybe that's why things are the way that they are. I wish they would at least move Jose Martinez up. He is getting on base, but I don't know that that's really his MO as a hitter. He's not typically a high on base percentage as far as walks kind of guy, and I like him better in a position to drive in runs than to be on base to try to create them himself. So I'm okay with that, but I can see the argument for that moving forward. Or at least I should say, while he's playing as well as he is, getting on base as much as he is. Opposing pitchers, though, who walk Jose Martinez twice in the same game, what are you doing? That's not a knock on Jose Martinez. He's just usually a bit more of a free swinger. Although I will say he's cut down on that a little bit this season. So not entirely shocking to see him getting on base like he is. What else you got? We're losing people on the Twitter because I think they're all bailing for St. Louis Blues pregame stuff. Even if you're not watching the pregame, just sort of like bracing yourself for the game to come. Cardinals pregame show is also on right now as well, so we're probably losing some people to that. Graham, you're out of questions. I didn't know that could ever happen. I've answered all the questions that you possibly have. Think about Pirates questions and send those to me, because that will be the next preview. I'm talking to Alex Stumpf tomorrow. Thanks, Matt. I'm glad you could join in. Thanks for the questions. This was a nice conversation between Twitter and YouTube. Even though I think the YouTube went out at one point, I'm not really sure what happened there in that stretch of like 3 or 4 minutes before it came back. So we'll see when the replay goes up if there's just like this dead space for a few minutes. But a lot of Tums for the Blues game tonight, probably. Do you think David Freese should be in the Cardinals Hall of Fame? I've had a couple interesting conversations about this, because the reality is David Freese had like one postseason's worth of good moments as a Cardinal, but those moments defined that postseason. So I guess it sort of depends on how you see the Cardinals Hall of Fame. Is it, the longevity of someone's career that makes them a Hall of Famer, or the significance of their time as a Cardinal? I think it'd be hard pressed to find someone who, at least in recent history, made more of a significant impact in their time as a Cardinal than David Freese did. So in that regard, yes, I would absolutely have him as a Cardinals Hall of Famer. But I think I understand the argument that he kind of didn't really do anything outside of that small window of the postseason in 2011. David Freese is freaking famous. That is true. I'm not sure that really is part of the criteria for being in the Cardinals Hall of Fame, but if it is, he's got that box checked for sure. So yeah, I can I can justify the argument both ways, which maybe is a sign that it's not like a sure thing. But for me, if you're looking at the Cardinals Hall of Fame as like these are the guys who had an impact on the history of the Cardinals organization, David Freese definitely has that spot. I mean, he has some of the most iconic moments in recent Cardinals history. So there's that. What about Isringhausen? Do I agree with his selection to the Cardinals Hall of Fame? I mean, he's the one of the best closers the Cardinals have ever had. He gave me anxiety every time, but one of the best Cardinals statistic or closers as far as the games he locked down. So yeah, I'm fine with it. I mean, it's interesting because if you think about the impact that he had, it's far more like statistical, right? The things that he generated was the numbers, the box score, if you will, over his career. David Freese doesn't fill up the box score, but he has the more memorable moments. So again, I think it just depends on how you're defining the Hall of Fame. Is it their career as a Cardinal or a hall of famous moments and the guys who created them? Trevor Rosenthal and Jason Mott. You know, it's weird because I would say no, but like you can make the same argument that I just made for both of those guys too. Jason Mott had some pretty incredible moments. Trevor Rosenthal has the stat line that's, you know, in the Cardinals history books. For me, I feel like the Trevor Rosenthal thing was so contentious just because, yes, he set a single season record for saves, but holy moly. First of all, he was out there so often that I'd hate to imagine what would have happened if he didn't set the record for saves in a single season. But with Jason Mott, again, he had a couple moments, and you know that's significant too. So I don't know. I like even Lee Smith. It's hard for me because I find myself capable of making the arguments either way. And ultimately it comes down to what should the Hall of Fame be in your mind? Is it the significance that a person had in their snapshot moment of time, however long that was, or is it the significance of their snapshot moment in time, if that makes sense? How significant was the entirety of their career as a Cardinal? And I don't know if I really know what I think the answer to that should be. I go back and forth on it. I don't know. Maybe I don't put as much stock into the whole Hall of Fame thing as I should as a fan. It's nice, but it's not something I'm going to get super worked up about. Any last minute questions? I'm going to wrap this up and go get situated for the games, both of them. I was supposed to be working tonight and I ended up not working, so now I'm home to watch the Blues and the Cardinals as they both try to win tonight. Bye, Graham. Why are the Pirates so bad? Is that what your question for the Pirates preview was? Come on now. I guess I can ask that. Alex will probably have some, very analytical answer to that if I ask him, but we'll see. Going once? Going twice? All right, friends, shutting it down for the night. Thanks for hanging out with me on this Tuesday. Enjoy the game. Make sure that you check out the old YouTube channel. If you're here, go ahead and subscribe or share with a friend. If you're not here, go check it out later. You'd like to hear about their bad infield. Okay, infield, noted. I'll have a game recap of the Cardinals versus Phillies tonight. And then, like I said, look out for that Pirates series preview on Thursday. Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate that so much. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for chiming in the chat. If you're watching this on the replay, feel free to comment and leave any questions in the comments. I'll try to get to all of those as well. I read all of the comments, so don't hesitate to leave them. I'll see you all back on Twitter when we're done with all of this. Okay, bye!